Want to read it from mine?
I found it. All right. Pleased to introduce Dan Cryer. He is currently the fire marshal for the city of Brooklyn Park. He's been performing code inspections for 8 years, spanning multiple code books and in multiple jurisdictions. Dan's main expertise is in the Minnesota State Fire Code, and he also has experience enforcing the International Property Maintenance Code as well as city ordinances. Daniel has been with the city of Brooklyn Park since 2018 and has been the fire marshal since 2020. In his inspections role, Dan has been involved with a number of hoarding condition cases in single-family homes and in multifamily dwellings. Dan takes an empathetic approach to code enforcement to achieve voluntary compliance. This approach has been found to generally yield long-standing success in preventing recurrences of violations. Prior to starting a career in the fire service, Dan was a chemist for the Minnesota Department of Health and has a master's of science in environmental health from the University of Minnesota. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, give me 1 second. I think I have to share first, and then I can switch you to full screen.
Sounds good. Awesome.
Good go.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you to everyone from the Hoarding Task Force. It looks like our screen is highlighted. But is everyone seeing the PowerPoint presentation that's virtual right now?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so I'm Dan, and I'm currently the fire marshal here at Brooklyn Park. Previously, I worked at the city of North St. Paul, and I've updated a little bit. I'm actually at almost 8 years performing code inspections, and about 9 years, approaching 10 in the fire service. And then I have a master's in environmental health. So fire marshal, fire inspector looks different in many different cities. And so here in the city of Brooklyn Park, we're really fortunate that we have a dedicated fire inspection group, dedicated rental licensing division group, and a dedicated kind of neighborhood specialist code enforcement group. At the city of North St. Paul, when I was the fire inspector, I was doing all of that. I was doing fire inspections of commercial properties, rental licensing inspections, as well as code enforcement. So a bulk of my experience came from North St. Paul. It was a great start. And then coming here to Brooklyn Park, I gained a much different perspective, but I found a lot of value in how well I worked across the different departments with both Gail and Michelle. So how can a fire department identify hoarding conditions? First, through inspections. Like I said, fire inspectors and fire marshals wear different hats depending on what city they're in. It could be through a rental licensing inspection. Places like Golden Valley, their fire department does rental licensing. North St. Paul does that. It could be a joint inspection like we do here in Brooklyn Park, where it could be rental licensing and the fire department on the same inspection. Property maintenance inspections, starting with the exterior, generally can give you a little bit of an indication on what conditions might be on the inside, not always. And then fire inspections. So as a fire marshal, I'm doing periodic fire inspections of all commercial properties in Brooklyn Park, and I might identify it in a commercial setting. There's many commercial properties that, one of the benefits, you own the building, you get to put in there what you want. And sometimes that becomes, the playground and the storage area in the off season for the boats, the four-wheelers, and then eventually that just grows into being a much larger problem than they anticipated because the storage consumes what space was left. It could be through permitting process, and that permitting process can come in the forms of just somebody wanting to maybe make an addition to their property, or they're making changes in their occupancy. And again, it could even come from that permit inspection. So And it might not even be related. It could be something like a hood cleaning permit inspection. But now I'm on site, I'm there, I'm looking at something. I have a responsibility to respond to make sure that it's a safe property. Emergency response is where we're going to identify people with hoarding conditions or living in hoarding conditions in single family homes. So if it's not a rental property, it's an owner occupied single family home, we might be there to provide medical assistance or some other emergency response. Well, if we identify that this person is living with, with clutter, that's something that we want to note, and I'll get to that later on why we would do that as a fire department. And then we want to make sure we can try to give them services and direct them to resources so they can get the help they need. City and department initiatives, things like aging in place, becoming a senior friendly or an older adult friendly community. That can be another way in identifying hoarding conditions, because you might start up a process like senior safety, because we want to encourage people to live out the time that they want to spend in their home. Maybe they grew up in this house, but we want to make sure they're safe. And that can sometimes lead to initiatives of, oh, you've lived here for 50 years, plus it looks like you've accumulated 50 years worth of clutter. We want to make sure you can live here as long as you want to safely. So fire and life safety risks from hoarding, increased fire load. And so below I've got the Springfield tire fire. So if you're a Simpsons fan, you remember that thing just burns forever. Um, and that actually is like tire fires. They do just go on forever, it seems like. But that's our concern. The more stuff that's there that can burn, the bigger the fire, the bigger the concern. Especially if it's more lightweight combustibles, paper products, newspapers, even cardboard boxes, furniture. Modern furniture is made up of synthetic materials and lightweight wood. So it burns very easily, burns very hot. It can block egress. So that other cartoon picture was showing a blocked fire exit. The fire load is one challenge, but if we can make sure somebody can get out of that property quickly, that solves a lot of problems, because life safety is always our first priority. At anything we do in the fire service, we're wanting to make sure that people are safe. Access issues would be the opposite. How do we get in to help somebody? It may be something as simple as someone fell and they can't get up, right? We're there just for a lift assist, something that all they need is help up because maybe they've grown weak because of any number of conditions. They don't need to go to a hospital. But if we have a hard time getting to you to get you the help, that's just going to delay that service that you want. Um, if it's something more extreme, like a medical, like a cardiac arrest, we bring a stretcher in, that cot that's on wheels. Well, that thing takes up a whole doorway. So if we don't have a clear path to get to you, now we have to figure out a way to get somebody, out of a condition, a hoarding condition, to that cot. It just leads to other challenges that can delay care. So those are the big concerns that we look for when we encounter it from a fire department standpoint. So the pictures I have, not trying to just jar anything and throw stuff up for, to be alarming, but some of the real examples of what we can encounter. So this was a fire that we had in Brooklyn Park, and this is just an example of when you have the excessive clutter, it creates that increased fire load and can create problems. So this fire, this was a picture from the backyard. We're now looking toward the house. We can see there's just a lot of items. I mean, it's a lifetime of accumulated items, a lot of collector's items, working on small engines. I mean, a very storied past, for this homeowner, and a lot of valued treasures in here. And you could see that as we were working with the homeowner, who was safe. No one was hurt in this fire, so it was really a great success. But you can tell every piece had a story and something tied to it that was sentimental to the owner. So how this fire started was just having that increased fire load too close to what the fire pit is. So the cinder blocks there, kind of in the middle left of the picture, was a makeshift kind of outdoor fire pit. And something that a lot of us do at any time, just had a wreck fire in the backyard, no big deal. This was during one of the drier summers that we've had recently, and it just created some embers and started leaves and other dry vegetation that was nearby on fire, and then just having everything else catch fire. And you can see tires are missing from some riding lawnmowers there. That all just generates a lot more heat, gives off a lot more opportunity for that fire to grow. This was looking downstairs in the house. So what really the fortunate part about this is that all of the occupants were upstairs at the time of the fire. We fortunately they didn't have to try to get out of there through this stairwell, and we didn't have to go in there to try to save them. The basement was relatively unharmed. Water damage, maybe some smoke, but really a great story. And this is just a great picture example of blocked egress. I mean, in the event of an emergency, could you get through this stairwell quickly? And that's, the concern that we had. This is the hallway. Again, same thing, smaller pathway, one person at a time. I mean, it's a narrow hallway to begin with because it's an older home, but some of the concerns we would have would be, yes, there was a fire, they could get out quickly, but what if there was a cardiac arrest in one of the back bedrooms? Could we get the services to them to provide care as quickly as possible? And this is looking from the front of the house. So the next day where we did actually, the garage collapsed and the house did collapse. But I mean, right front and center, you can see a collectible old Model A Ford. There were collectors' cars in here, a lot of them. And well, a lot, I say a lot, it might be 3, but I have 0. So I think it's a lot compared to my standards. And so this is the stuff that we worry about. And so when I work with somebody who might be living with excessive clutter, I'm going to be sharing these examples from these stories. I'm going to be letting them know that this is what scares me. I want to make sure you're safe. I want to make sure that even something as fun as a wreck fire doesn't turn into a catastrophic event. This is a different home. This is looking in through the kitchen. Now, this one is probably something that on the surface wouldn't stand out as having a lot of problems. Some fuzzier photos, but this was going to the front door. So you could tell that they have used the kitchen and this back door as their primary means to go in and out of the house. And that made sense. There's a detached garage. That's pretty common, I think, with people who have this style of home. But their front door wasn't used. So when our firefighters went to go put out the fire here, when they tried to access the front door, they couldn't because it was blocked by all of the items. Fortunately, I mean, the fire was in the back, so going down the stairs was more important for us. But had we have needed to go through the front door, it would have delayed us getting to be able to put water on the fire. Fuzzy photo, I didn't take all of these, but
Privacy, it's privacy.
yeah, this is the basement. This was where we had the fire started, and this was, again, fortunately, no one was hurt in this one. Everyone was able to get out, but this was a case where you had a family living with excessive clutter, excessive items. They had a friend stay with them, not knowing what is being stored underneath the bed. The accidental fire starts. That's the person that was in the room at the time, was just a friend staying the night. And all because they were unaware that they stored fireworks underneath the bed. And so the space heater that person was using was a little too close. They maybe smoked in the bed. A number of sources could have been what caused this fire, but and again, very accidental. I mean, if you came to my house, I wouldn't be able to, I can tell you what's under my bed because there's just wrapping paper tucked in a hiding spot, but I can't tell you what's under my daughter's bed. I don't know what would be in other places stuffed throughout my house, you know? My wife could, she's very organized, but I'm not gonna be the one to ask. So how do we address these issues? The books of the trade and tools of the trade are kind of how I approach it. So books of the trade, we have the International Property Maintenance Code, Minnesota State Fire Code. The code commentary books are key. If you're a code official doing any type of code work, always buy the code commentary books. I find them incredibly valuable because they are basically the why behind the code. They are the descriptions coming from the code committee on why the code was put in place. I've referenced it a number of times because you're inevitably going to get asked, why do I have to follow this code? Tools of the trade, educational voluntary approach is what I like to follow first. We can write correction orders, we can give citations. Citations, we're just going to get money. That doesn't fix the problem. Correction orders, same thing. It gives somebody a timeline, leaves a sour taste in their mouth. They get upset, maybe Big Brother, the government, or anyone's coming after them. And it's really can be abrasive. Whereas if you can give that educational approach and lead to voluntary compliance, now there's buy-in, and hopefully that leads to that long-standing success. In my previous role at North St. Paul, one of the places that we were involved with was a family dealing with, they were living with hoarding conditions and they were at risk of losing a family member. The county was involved because of child protection, and it's difficult to watch that process happen, but that became that citation, that correction order. We had been working with them for a long time and they cleaned up the outside very nicely before it came to that point of almost losing a family member. Then came to the interior, and we found a lot of things that were really surprising to us, but that family, again, they wanted that compliance because their family member was on the line. So you can see how extreme it can get, and that's why I like that voluntary educational approach. I think it can yield a better success, and better trust. So we'll look specifically at the fire code because that's why I'm here. I'm wearing a fire department shirt. I'm not property maintenance anymore. Michelle and Gail can lead you on that. So the main areas we're going to look at as fire code officials will be Chapter 3, Chapter 5, Chapter 9 under certain conditions, and Chapter 10. And so what these would apply to would be the Minnesota State Fire Code does not apply to single family homes. It only applies to all other types of properties, generally commercial, multifamily dwellings, institutional occupancies, any type of business you can think of, but this doesn't apply to your single family home. So as we're going in, I have to get a little creative on how I apply these codes or how I word it. I'm not going to write correction orders from this code book to a single family home because legally I can't do that, but I can use it as an education piece. So the font's a little small, but basically what we're looking at is combustible waste. So section 304, we're saying that you can't have excessive combustible waste. This is just talking about that increased fire load. We're looking at how can we minimize an unnecessarily large fire. And then this talks about where it's allowed and different waste material accumulating. This one is really powerful because it is a little subjective. However, it's pretty clear that anything that can create a fire hazard. If you're working with a newer code official, I would recommend just watch the abuse of using this because it is subjective. Like one person's consideration of what's accumulative waste or what's excessive waste or what creates a fire hazard is not the same as the next. So definitely very powerful, but has a tendency to possibly be abused and overused. 315 is general storage. We're going to talk about things that need to be orderly and in stacks. So the concern here is we don't want stuff to fall on the firefighters when they're in there operating. We don't want, when the fire is going on, a big tall box, a stack of boxes to fall over and to crush somebody. And then we also need them to be stored and separated from heaters and heating devices so that we don't get the accidental ignition. General rule of thumb we'll throw out there is 3 feet from heat. So if you think of the length of your arm, that's approximately 3 feet. That's what you'd be looking for. If you want to test it out and you use a space heater, we're not quite out of winter yet and you have one, just put some material close to it, 2 feet away, and feel how hot it gets. If you're somebody that has a space heater under your desk, you're familiar with it, and that's good. We just don't want it to be there as a constant condition, because that's going to degrade the product and then maybe cause an accidental fire. 315.3.2 talks about we can't store combustible materials near an exit or a stairway or a ramp. Again, that's looking more only in commercial settings, but the idea behind it is we want those exits to be clear if there is a fire. So if we have combustible materials by our exit ways, then there's potential for the fire to block our way out. And it could be a very small fire, but now our exit door is blocked. Chapter 5 is going to talk about access to buildings and openings. We're talking about access doors. Basically, this is the fire department getting in to provide emergency service. Pretty straightforward. What we're looking for is we need to be able to open a door to get in to help you. Exterior doors have to work that way. If they aren't, then they have to be marked as this door is blocked. But yeah. This would be if you have excessive clutter, you might block someone from getting in to help you. Means of egress. So as a code official, means of egress is key for me. That's probably the thing that I'm probably the most strict about, because I can let a building burn down as long as everybody is out of there. That's fine. I mean, it shouldn't happen. We have full-time firefighters in Brooklyn Park, and we train to make sure that doesn't happen. But if everybody's out of the building, our whole demeanor on the fire ground changes. We're focused now on property preservation, and then we can get some great success stories there. Reliability, we're looking at exits have to be reliable, maintained free from obstructions and impediments, and they have to be used in the case of an emergency. Obstructions, which is 1031.3, pretty much same thing. It looks more at snow and ice. So middle of winter here in Minnesota, that's generally one we use a lot. People forget to shovel out the walkway to their rear door. We're gonna make sure that it still opens. So chapter 9 is fire sprinklers. Chapter 9 is the fire protection systems chapter. And I highlight sprinklers because I think the next slides I go into how sprinklers work. So basically sprinklers are designed to put out a fire based on what it thinks is going to be in that room, right? You work in an office building, we're going to plan for some office furniture, computers, some people, stuff on their desks. We're not planning for tire storage. Auto shop, we're going to plan for some combustible liquids, vehicles, combustible metals, a much higher fire hazard. Maybe not fire hazard in the risk, but if a fire gets going, it's going to be a bigger, hotter fire. This one can kind of be used in times where there's excessive clutter, especially in commercial industries or any building with fire sprinklers. Because even multifamily dwellings that have sprinklers have a design to them. And so this would apply in the sense of saying this sprinkler system is not designed to put out a fire with this much fire load. Again, it's a little bit of a gray area in the sense of, can it put out the fire? Will it not put out the fire? Where I would bring this into the mix is saying, going back to the original design of the sprinkler system, or requiring that an engineer gives their analysis based on the new fire load. And so this is just a quick overview. If you look at the bottom, the density is talking about how much water comes out. And then what we're looking on the vertical axis, the y-axis is our increasing square footage. And then if you see where we see the lines, the trend lines of light, ordinary 1, ordinary 2, extra hazard group 1, extra hazard group 2. Basically what we're getting at is from moving light occupancies are like your office occupancies. We're not expecting a lot of combustible material there. We don't need a lot of water to control the fire there. Extra hazard group 2, at 0.4 gallons per minute per square foot, we're expecting that we could have a big fire. And they even design sprinklers now that put out 1 gallon per minute per square foot. Those are your big high storage places, mattresses, really concerning places where we don't want a fire. So if they design, let's say they design an occupancy, commercial setting, residential setting to a light hazard or an ordinary 1, it will not be able to put out a fire, or in theory, it probably will not control a fire that's now has a fire load that's an ordinary 2, because there's not going to be enough water. So differing approach, kind of brought this up a little bit. Hoarding conditions in apartments, hoarding conditions in single family homes. In apartments, I get some ability to issue orders. Those orders are going to go to the property owner. I'm going to say, hey, there's too much stuff in here. This sprinkler system isn't going to work, or egress is blocked. The concern there is that there's an increased fire risk, not only to the renter, but also to the adjacent units. Hoarding conditions in a single family home, is it rental or owner occupied? Rental, you may get some rental licensing conditions that you can trigger. Owner occupied, your home is your castle, and international codes always maintain that. We're looking at how can I educate you and keep you safe in your home. So for me, educational approach all around. Working smoke alarms. If I can't find a way to reduce hoarding conditions, I at least want you to be as safe as you can. And working smoke alarms is number 1. With working smoke alarms, we get that early notification of a fire, and then you can get out to safety. Carbon monoxide alarms, same thing. It's the silent killer. Carbon monoxide is a byproduct of fire. It's a byproduct of heating HVAC equipment that maybe is failing. So carbon monoxide alarms, just having the right amount of detection. Fire sprinklers, whether it's residential or commercial. I mean, if somebody's living with hoarding conditions and they want to put in fire sprinklers in their house, that would be a very awesome approach. But it may be a simple, where we see this in the commercial setting is businesses that maybe go through ebb and flow of their sales, and maybe in a low sales time, they're increasing their stock. They know that they're going to hopefully get back to it, but they have an increased amount of storage. And we've seen this here in Brooklyn Park. They need a bigger sprinkler system. If they can put in those safety measures, then yeah, they're allowed to store as much of that product as they want, because their sprinkler system now accounts for the increased fire load. And the benefit to them is when they see the swing in their sales, they don't have to worry about renting out another space or making an addition to the building. They can store it all on site, which is a real benefit to them. The other benefit would be insurance. Your insurance premiums generally go down with a better sprinkler system. For homes, we have these range hood automatic extinguishers. So hopefully this. Yeah. All right, we're still highlighted. Is everyone seeing the YouTube video that we're watching?
Yes.
Awesome. So these are automatic range hood extinguishers. They're really incredible. very quick. We can watch it one more time. So how these operate is, you actually need flame. And so cooking is one of the, it's listed as the top sources of fires. We're seeing in Brooklyn Park that it isn't quite our number one source. Careless smoking seems to be our number one heat source, but cooking is a close second. And it's normal. We all cook. I mean, if you're probably cooking 2 to 3, 4 times a day. And if you're someone with excessive clutter, you might have excessive combustibles on your countertops. It might be one of the few areas that you access in your home. Well, this would be a great way to prevent that fire from getting any larger. Actual flame occurs, it lights a little wick, a fuse, and then that opens up that canister, which drops the extinguishing agent. All right. Fire stops are like $40, $50 for the pair. And this is just a magnet. They just magnet under your range hood. If somebody has a microwave above their stove, they make a product for that too. So just a great cheap way to increase safety, knowing that maybe we're working on trying to reduce the hoarding conditions through other approaches. So kind of wrapping it up here, the best approaches I've seen is just focusing on the safety of the person. You know, we want to support them as they live in their home. We want to give them that reassurance that we're here for them. Hopefully we can achieve some voluntary compliance, educate them on those safety measures, maybe improve some of the safety through better smoke alarms, fire stops, and just really support them as, you know, the person that we're there for. Teamwork. Gail and I have worked on a few of these here in Brooklyn Park, and Michelle and I have too. So we've got, just don't hesitate to reach out to your fire department. We're happy to be a part of it and give you our perspective. You know, at the end of the day, our goal is for people to live healthy lives and then contact local inspection agencies. Well, that's me and my contact info, so.
Okay.
Thank
Have you ever
you.
seen the uniform inspection checklist?
I don't think I have.
Okay, so we gotta give that to you and get your opinion on it.
All right.
I have a copy in my bag.
Wonder if you got the 2 versions.
Yep, I'm gonna give them the quick one, because that's what I use most of the time, but yeah, the other one is just going room by room.
Right. But it also kind of looks at others, the stuff.
You think so?
I thought so when I
Okay.
looked at it last.
I'll
could
have
be
to,
wrong. I could be.
I'll have to look at it again. And then, so sorry, I'm jumping right in here.
Yeah.
So, for combustibles and a lot of paper, is there any, when it's contained into a file cabinet, are you better with that or not?
Yeah, I would say that's, you know, a
Then it's-
metal file cabinet or even like the plastic used for it is even really hard to start fire.
Mhm.
So that's better
Particle
than just
board
loose
lights up,
paper.
I'm sure, quickly, but there's
But
a
it-
lot of particle board file cabinets.
But it's harder to start that on fire
It
than
is,
a pile
than
of
a piece of
paper.
paper.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a better condition.
And
than-
when they're in plastic containers or a tote, is that
Same idea as like a
Okay.
plastic file
a
cabinet.
little better?
Yep.
Okay. See that?
Yeah.
Harm reduction, right?
Harm reduction. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, good point.
I like
That's
to
it.
call it good, better, best.
Yeah,
Let's see if we can start with good. And then we can move towards better.
Yeah.
great.
And if we get to best, we're gonna do a dance.
Right, and then there's party room.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions they want to ask Fire Marshal Daniel Cryer? What's that?
If you can hear me, how long was he at North St. Paul?
How long were you at North St. Paul?
I was at North St. Paul for 3 years, 2015 to 2018.
I was there 18 years. It's my home grounds.
I'm sorry, I think that's Tim, but I can barely hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's where I grew up.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
With the big snowman.
Yeah. The Friday night car shows.
Okay.
Well, my question, I know you mentioned that it's very subjective, so there really isn't amount there's not a quantitative amount for fire load then, like.
No, outside of like the design for a sprinkler system, there really isn't.
Okay.
At least referencing like the 300 codes there, it would just be, yeah, this looks like a lot of stuff. That might be a fire hazard,
Sure.
you know,
So
or
it's
you,
kind of,
yeah.
And what about, like, I would love to see a code that referenced volume of space
That's
filled
what
with things.
Yep.
Like,
That's
not
what I
more than 50%, not more than 25%, not of floor space, of height of ceiling. I mean,
yeah.
I would love some
Yeah,
more objective measurements,
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
right? And
you'll
I'm
get
sure it
those
depends on how
measured.
it's stored too, because if you get proper racking, you can go way up, and if it's
Yep.
strapped down, it can go way up,
Isn't there
especially
something
commercial.
with the sprinkler system, you probably have to have
I
some.
think it says 18 inches. Is that
Where
right?
it's-
Exactly,
Inches
yeah.
on the top.
High piled, so we would call high piled storage of most things, is at 12 feet high. And now highly combustible items like pallets, tires are at 6 feet high.
Okay.
So, and those are different sections. They're specific to that. So if someone were to store something that was 12 feet or taller, that essentially it triggers fire sprinklers. But if it's like tires, pallets, that's at 6 feet, that would also trigger fire sprinklers. But the way around it is, instead of storing everything at 12 feet, you put it at 10 feet, and then it doesn't really talk about how much floor space.
Right.
Uh,
And I think a lot about apartments and homes generally is who I'm working with. So not that people don't have outbuildings or storage units
Right.
where it's a whole nother,
You're not getting 12-foot ceilings in
a storage unit, you will.
would, yeah, there you
But
go.
no one's living there.
You
I
shouldn't
mean, it's
be.
still a
yeah.
danger, generally speaking.
We've had people living in storage units that we've
Oh,
become
yeah,
involved
yeah.
in, but, you know, they're not intended for living uses, so.
or massage services.
So I think sometimes something that I come in contact with, and just recently this came about with a new client, is property management having a very subjective idea that doesn't have even the specifics of what that has to say what to do, what the expectation is. But things like, yeah, you need to reduce this by 50%.
Mhm.
You know, in a month. I mean, that, you know, things like that, or, this happened just this month. A client who had cleaned the bathroom and the management came to look at it and made a notation in the notes that she still had bottles on the vanity. And my comment to her was, not to the property management, but to my client was, well, it's discriminatory unless every other resident in this building is not allowed to have bottles on their vanity. I said, this is where actually fire marshal would be your better source of good information as to what's acceptable and what isn't.
Yeah.
Because they will look at where the safety issues are. Whereas property management, in their own subjective world of what they think is clean, what's dirty, what's too much, just spouts stuff out. And I think that's a place where we have an opportunity to start to get better language, better information to those people in order to be able to make sure they're treating people fairly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
People who are working at it, who are trying to make a progression in reducing the load of stuff they have and following the rules, but, you know, with reasonable amounts of time and expectations.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. You can't just expect. You gotta be reasonable on your timelines.
Mhm.
The fire code's gonna say that. I mean, I can't tell somebody if they need fire sprinklers, I mean, somewhat related, unrelated, but, I can't just say you have a month to do it, knowing that, no, that's gonna reasonably take 3 months to install and
Mhm.
probably more like a year because they've got to secure financing, go out to bid and things like that. For me to give them a 30-day turnaround, great. Now I just shut the business down and nobody wins. So,
So
yeah.
here's how often, your field is invited to speak to property management conferences and meetings to share what, particularly around this topic of hoarding, what is relative to, expect.
Yeah,
Or
we're lucky in Brooklyn Park. Our police, we have crime-free housing ordinance in Brooklyn Park, so our police lead a lot of the discussion with our apartment property managers.
Oh, that's
And
great.
I think we meet quarterly,
Mhm.
and we are at the table with them to be able to share our concerns. We don't generally get into a lot of hoarding. We don't see it a lot in apartments, at least that I'm brought up to me in Brooklyn Park, but I don't know. But if it were brought up, it would be something we would definitely approach. Our what we run into a lot is access. It's a lot of, do we have the right keys? Are there cars blocking ways? Are people parking in fire lanes?
Okay.
But yeah, we're lucky we have a seat at the table to be able to talk to them and work through that.
Mhm.
I didn't have, in North St. Paul, the difference was I was the rental inspector, so I was personally developing those relationships with the property managers.
Wow.
So some give and take on that, right? That
Mhm.
one, I'm working with them monthly or something on a number of things, whereas this one, if I see them once a quarter, okay.
And what is the meeting? Cause I'm just thinking this would be good in our model of what some cities are doing.
You guys go to that one, right?
I'll get invited. It is actually, a multi-family group. And I
We have a
can.
couple.
So and
We
it's
have our- we have our-
hosted by the city? Or
It's,
hosted by
it's
the
hosted
property
by our
manager?
I usually go to
Franco
property management and they have it, cause I was invited
It-
once.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we have a rule
Multi-housing.
called crime-free multi-housing.
Yep. so-
And they are often working with police officers and they often have groups of local landlords who attend these as part of the crime-free housing. And so some of the groups that I've spoke to are part of that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
and in Brooklyn Park, they meet quarterly. Other cities might meet at different frequency.
Any other questions we want in our recording today?
Oh, sorry, we do have the crime-free multifamily. That we require property managers to go through that training. But then we also have the Brooklyn Park Property Managers Rental Coalition.
Okay.
And that one's quarterly. So, a number of us are invited to that one. I don't do as much in rental properties or inside multifamily rental properties. So I haven't been to one in a little while.
Yeah, I send, someone else from my team goes to it from the fire department. Police guide the conversation, but that doesn't mean they're always looking for new ideas because it's only so often they can say, hey, we need to look at reducing crime, or hey, the stats look great, you know?
Right. Well, thank you for coming today. It's
Yeah.
really great.
I would say.
you.
To the park that.
Thank you.
Are there any questions from anyone online?
Okay, I think we'll go ahead and stop the recording.